Suckdologizing old man trap?
Six separate tyrannists! The South shall be free!
Throughout the history of the world, there have been very disturbing assassination attacks that have led people to wonder what on earth must have brought about such in the first place. Leaders will always have rebels. Some oppose their views while some oppose their acts. It's never easy being a leader, especially when you're under the spotlight and judged for every single step you take. Same was the case with these leaders. There may have been mistakes or so it seemed to those who step forward to right the wrongs in their own way. A death penalty decided, not by God or by the law, but simply by those against them. Here are 10 infamous assassinations in history. 10. Benazir Bhutto. Benazir Bhutto was the former Prime Minister of Pakistan and the only woman on this list. Bhutto was in the office from 1988 to 1990, and again from 1993 to 1996. After 9 years in exile, Bhutto was finally granted amnesty by the then President of Pakistan, Pervez Musharraf, in 2007. Bhutto wanted to contest in the forthcoming 2008 elections and her wish was granted. However, just 2 weeks before the election, on 27 December 2007, she was shot as she was waving to her supporters through the sunroof of her car. An explosive went off as well, resulting in her death and 24 others. Bhutto died in the hospital hours later. Soon after her assassination, Al-Qaeda commander Mustafa Abu al-Yazid claimed responsibility for the attack and referred to her as the most precious American asset. Riots broke out in Pakistan after news of Bhutto's assassination hit. Over 20 people were killed and lots of properties were destroyed. Bhutto's death also caused the international community to encourage Pakistan to continue to push for democracy. 9. Robert F. Kennedy. Many people in the world are familiar with the assassination of former US President John F. Kennedy. What we all probably didn't know was that John F. Kennedy's younger brother, Senator Robert F. Kennedy, was assassinated as well. On October 5, 1968, Robert F. Kennedy was shot by a Palestinian man named Sirhan. The assassination occurred after he had addressed his political supporters after winning the California presidential primaries. Robert took a shortcut through the kitchen on his way out, despite being advised against it by his bodyguards. In the crowded kitchen passageway, Sirhan was able to get to Senator Kennedy 3 times. Kennedy survived the initial shooting but died a day later in the hospital from his injuries. Sirhan was immediately captured, and on October 17, 1969, he was convicted and sentenced to death in the gas chamber. However, 3 years later, after a series of appeals were made to the court by Sirhan, his sentence was lessened to life in prison.
I thought that he was the prince. I thought he was the heir apparent to President Kennedy, and I wish the hell that he could have made it. When I saw him in real life, it was a thrill to me, sir. But when I saw him there that night at the Ambassador, he seemed like a saint.
8. Malcolm X. Malcolm X was a revolutionary activist and writer. He was one of the most galvanizing political figures of the 1950s and 1960s. He grew up an orphan and spent time in prison, where he became a member of the Nation of Islam and soon began promoting its ideas. Unlike Dr. King, Malcolm X rejected non-violence as a strategy and advocated for black separatism, saying African Americans couldn't succeed in a racist society dominated by whites.
You don't get freedom peacefully. Freedom is never safeguarded peacefully. Anyone who is depriving you of freedom isn't deserving of a peaceful approach by the ones who are being deprived of their freedom. And when black people in this country come out from under the mental straitjacket that the Negro clergymen have placed them in, and begin to see that the only way you can get freedom is to get it the same way the white man in this country got it from England.
But when Malcolm X fell out and defected from the Nation of Islam leadership, he became a marked man. Malcolm had told an interviewer on 19 February 1965 that he was a target for Nation of Islam. 2 days later, he was shot 21 times over his body after receiving 10 buckshot wounds from a shotgun at the Audubon Ballroom in New York City while he was giving a speech. After his death, it was confirmed that he was shot by 3 Nation of Islam members: Thomas Hagan, Norman 3X Butler, and Thomas 15X Johnson. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. expressed his sadness and motivated other activists and other radicals to continue his legacy.
The person you know as Malcolm X is no more.
The assassination of Malcolm X was an unfortunate tragedy, and it reveals that there are still numerous people in our nation who have degenerated to the point of expressing dissent through murder, and we haven't learned to disagree without being violently disagreeable.
7. Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the throne of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, wasn't exactly a well-loved personality and was described by historians as suspicious, hysterical, and unpopular. Still, he did accomplish one stunning feat. His death inadvertently launched the First World War. The Duke was shot on June 28, 1914 in Sarajevo, Bosnia, by Gavrilo Princip, a member of a Yugoslav independence movement known as Young Bosnia and an assassin for the Black Hand, a secret society formed by members of the Serbian army. Austria-Hungary believed the Serbian military was involved in the plot and issued an ultimatum, then invaded Serbia when part of the ultimatum was rejected. A tangle of political alliances then swept all over the major world powers into war, leading to millions of deaths. 6. John Lennon.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Tom Brokaw. This is today, December 9th. I'm here with Jane Pauley, and this entire half hour will be devoted to the murder of John Lennon, ex-Beatle, one of the best-known musicians and most influential people of his time.
Easily one of the most infamous assassinations of all time, not including government officials, was that of Beatles member and activist John Lennon. On the night of December 8, 1980, John and his wife Yoko Ono were returning to their home from a session at the recording studio. When they got out of their limousine, a man named Mark David Chapman shot Lennon dead in the street.
I saw John and Yoko get out of the limousine. They walked into the gate, and oh God, let me just. And then I heard four or five shots. They were ear shattering. I heard Yoko, and I heard a woman screaming. It was Yoko. She was screaming, "Help me!"
Chapman was caught minutes later by the authorities. They found him reading a copy of The Catcher in the Eye. A worldwide outpouring of grief and tribute followed John Lennon's assassination, culminating in a 10-minute silent vigil on December 14 that saw over 100,000 people gather in New York Central Park and tens of thousands of others in cities around the world. At least 2 of John Lennon's fans committed suicide after his assassination. The world was grieving a fallen star that had been taken too soon.
He's not dead. John Lennon can't be dead.
5. Martin Luther King Jr.
Very sad news for all of you, and I think sad news for all of our fellow citizens and people who love peace all over the world. And that is that Martin Luther King was shot and was killed tonight in Memphis.
Martin Luther King Jr. was a superstar of the civil rights movement. Unlike Malcolm X, he heavily relied on non-violence and civil disobedience to push for desegregation, voting rights, and other civil rights for African Americans. Despite King's steadfast commitment to non-violence, his opponents, mostly Southern whites, opposed to desegregation and enfranchisement for African Americans. White supremacists orchestrated bombings, beatings, and murders to maintain the status quo, and King eventually became one of the victims. Enter James R. Ray, a confirmed racist and small-time criminal. Ray began plotting the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. in early 1968. On October 4, 1968, Ray shot King, who was standing on a second-floor balcony of the Lorraine Motel in Memphis. He shot him with a sniper's bullet that struck him in the neck. Dr. King was pronounced dead after an hour later. He was 39 years old.
Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will.
Ray actually confessed to the crime the following October and claimed that he was a player in a conspiracy, but no proof was ever found to verify that claim. Some of King's family members believe that the US government has something to do with his death. Shock and anger from the assassination sparked rioting in more than 100 cities across the country. People were burning cars, setting fires, and looting. Throughout the few months following King's death, a wave of national mourning poured over the country. 4. John F. Kennedy. Notably, the most infamous presidential assassination in history is that of US President John F. Kennedy.
From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time.
Some consider the assassination to be the most controversial case in modern American history. Although he had not announced his candidacy formally before his death, it was clear that President Kennedy was going to run and seemed confident about his chances for re-election. The trip to Dallas and the other 8 states President JFK visited beforehand was meant to put a spotlight on natural resources and conservation efforts. His main goal visiting Dallas was to bring all of the Democrats together. Crowds of excited citizens lined in the streets to get their chance to see and wave to the Kennedys. Just after 12:30 p.m. on November 22, 1963, President John F. Kennedy was assassinated by Lee Harvey Oswald as he rode in a convertible through Dealey Plaza in downtown Dallas, Texas. Since the attack, there have been numerous conspiracy theories suggesting that Oswald was not the only one involved in the assassination. American citizens were stunned and outraged, and the whole incident sent Americans into a state of deep sorrow. However, Lee Harvey Oswald, the man who assassinated President Kennedy, was also assassinated himself just 2 days later after he went through with the assassination attack on John F. Kennedy. Honestly, he should have seen it coming after he killed one of the most loved US presidents in American history. On November 24, 1963, Oswald was brought to the basement of the Dallas police headquarters on his way to more secure country jail. A crowd of police and press gathered to watch his departure when a man named Jack Ruby emerged from the crowd and killed Oswald with a single shot from a .38 revolver. Ruby was immediately detained. Some call him a hero, but he was nonetheless charged with first-degree murder and sentenced to death. Ruby features prominently in Kennedy assassination conspiracy theories. Many believe that he killed Oswald to keep him from revealing a larger conspiracy. 3. Mahatma Gandhi. Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, popularly known as Mahatma Gandhi, was the leader of Indian nationalism in British-controlled India. Gandhi was a peace-loving man who believed in following a path of non-violent civil disobedience and eventually led India to her independence. One day, on his way to a prayer meeting, Gandhi was accosted by Malcom who fired 3 bullets into his chest at point-blank range. Gandhi was immediately taken to Birla House following the attack, but he didn't survive. On November 8, 1949, Godse was sentenced to death and was hanged a week later. It was believed that Godse's motive behind the assassination was driven by his anger over India's decision to give 420 million rupees to Pakistan. Godse believed that by doing so, India had been weakened when Pakistan gained independence. Godse considered himself a Brahmin, a term referring to a member of the highest caste or Varna in Hinduism. The Brahmins are the caste from which Hindu priests are drawn and are responsible for the teaching and maintaining sacred knowledge. Massive anti-Brahmin riots took place in India following the infamous assassination. People were holding the Indian government responsible and harshly criticized them for not protecting Gandhi well enough, considering that Gandhi had experienced multiple assassination attempts prior to being shot by Godse. 2. Abraham Lincoln and John Wilkes Booth. Abraham Lincoln, hailed by many historians as America's greatest president, was at a high point in 1865 when he was murdered. He had ended slavery in America, preserved the Union through the Civil War, and was embarking on the long road to Reconstruction. The president was attending a play at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C., when actor John W. Booth slipped into the president's booth and shot him in the head on Good Friday, April 14, 1865. Booth then leapt into the stage wielding a knife and said, "Si semper tyrannis," or "thus always to tyrants," in English, a famous line attributed to Brutus as Caesar's assassination. Which brings us to our number 1 assassination case in history. 1. Julius Caesar. The assassination of Abraham Lincoln was an almost recreation of the Julius Caesar assassination scene. Despite having lived more than 2,000 years ago, Julius Caesar remains one of the most famous leaders to have met a brutal end. The dictator in perpetuity of the great Roman Empire died on the Isles of March in 44 BC. Senators Brutus and Cassius led a gang of senators called the Liberators and stabbed the leader to death outside the theater of Pompeii. It was recorded that their motive behind the assassination was that they feared Caesar planned to do away with the Senate and create a dictatorship. Strangely enough, once they got Caesar out of the way, they set up a tyrannical government themselves. Which of these assassinations was the most brutal to you? And can you defend any of these assassinations? Let me know in the comment section below. Don't forget to press the like button and subscribe for more awesome videos like this. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in my next video.